This 15-minute video is part of the CR391 basic installation presentation. It is also available as a separate MP4 file. The resolution and frames per second have been reduced and voiceover added later, all to limit the size of this. Hi, I am Mark, founder and CEO of Softcon. Sorry, not a sexy number to show you how to install the CR391, but Santa, who's brought you a great present. So this is how the CR391 is shipped. Yes, colorful like a present with general marketing info on the outside of the box. Generally packaged without the 7 amp hour battery installed, battery supplied externally because of weight problems. But yes, the battery does fit in snugly into the housing. You can ship it in there, but then the packaging must be kept down flat as it's shown. That is, with the bottom down as the packaging is currently shown. Before we open your present, note the cutout in the packaging, a window of information. This shows the sticker on the lid of the housing, printed with model number and serial number. The unique serial number is a number in a component in the PC board and is recorded by Softcon for guarantee purposes. It also serves as the MAC address, that's the Media Access Control address used by TCP. The typical model number is either CR391B or CR391M. It is just less components in making the product cheaper if you're not using these features. The M version includes the Ethernet components, so you can connect Ethernet TCP. The B version does not contain these versions, and then communication is via RS4 at 485 LAN slave. And yes, the M version can be mastered to the LAN, but it can also be a slave to LAN. Then you do not use the TCP connection. Other build options are available on request. Example, with GSM and Wi-Fi directly on the PC board. Please contact Softcon. To open your presents, simply lift up the tab and lift up the sides of the packaging. Now you see the basic access control connections. These are the default connections and simplify your installation if you're doing basic access control. More details later and in the presentation. So open the box and take out your present. There you will find a 45 key that fits all Softcon controllers, and yes, it can only be removed when the lid is locked. Note again the sticker with the model number and the serial number, but also note there are LEDs that indicate the state of the controller. And yes, this should be installed that you can see these LEDs. These LEDs show the run state. You'll have a green LED ticking. You'll have a red LED showing you that the controller is online. Also indicates other communications happenings. The controller housing is ABS flame retard. So yes, plastic that won't burn, but of course it will melt. At the back there are eyelets to help you mount the controller simply, and yes, you can put it mounted vertically or horizontally. Horizontally is the better way to go. So let's open your present. Inside you will find documentation with terminal connections, where links are and what they are for. Also a map to help you drill the holes correctly to mount the controller. Also there could be a booklet that shows you how the handheld programmer for local changing of parameters, looking at settings, and help you install and test the product offline. You will see that the LEDs that we saw on the outside of the box actually are tubes taking the light from LEDs on the board through to the face of the housing. There is also a tamper detect, an optical tamper detect, that will give you an alarm on input number 16 when you open the lid. The lid can be removed by simply moving it up, and note you need about 3 centimeters on the side to open the lid, and also you need about 25 millimeters on the top. So 30 millimeters on the side and 30 millimeters on the top to open the lid and to take it off. Inside the lid there are spare cable ties. I will show you why just now, and also a goodies bag that contains spare links. It contains plugs and screws to mount the housing, and also resistors and capacitors for flyback diodes. I will explain later. To remove the cover over the power supply, the high voltage stuff, simply lift down the clip and pull it out, and then you will see the power supply, 3 amp power supply, and also a charger to the 7 amp hour battery. On the side you will see 3 strange looking slots. These are where the cables go in. It's called slide tie. It's patented to Softcon. You simply pull out a slide and enlarge the hole for where the cables go through. And yes, when you are done, you will cut the bottom edge and slightly fit the cables into the housing. There are ties, cable ties on the inside that you feed the cables through, and when you are done, you will tighten this to hold them in place. And check before you mount that the cable ties, that the tips of it are actually through the lock of the cable tie. It's simpler to do it now. So to mount your controller, use the map that we supplied, and yes, allow enough space, as I've said, 30 millimeters on the side to open, 25 on the top, and of course allow for your plastic, for your trunking. Tape it down with insulation tape or masking tape, and then we of course get it level. This beautiful controller should be mounted, and allow for, if it's against the ceiling, rather match it up against the ceiling, because nothing is straight. On this map there are crosshairs where you should drill, and yes, this is a critical dimension, and we do suggest Murphy. There might be a bump in the, you do not want this drill bit to move, so flatten it and use a punch where you're going to drill. And yes, don't be a hero, use the side of the hammer, punch so that you can drill. We provided you with plugs. It requires a 6 millimeter drill, and yes, you need to drill 3 centimeters into the wall, and yes, mark your drill and drill in right through the paper. It just makes life simpler. And then obviously tap in your plugs and screw in your screws, leaving about 5 millimeters so that you can hang your controller through the eyelets. To hang the controller, stick on the right side first through the eyelid, and then the left side, because you can see the left side it's not under the controller. And then obviously put in your trunking if required and as required. Remove the slides and the power will go through the top slide. But before we do that, let me show you how to prepare your cables. Slip the cables through, get the correct length, mark them, and then we need to cut back the outer sheath. Simply do this by bending it over, nick it, and it will actually burst open, and go around and get the outer sheath off, and then just pull it off. And yes, the outer sheath must be under the cable tie. So let Santa teach you how to use a wire stripper, a side cutter. There's a V, and yes, the V part should be towards you with a flat part on the outside. You just simply strip away from you, the flat side away from you. And then the strands, the multi-strands, you must twist them together to make a decent connection. Otherwise, these strands, simple little strands, could break and will not make a good connection. And yes, we do suggest use lugs, because this squashes the cables together, obviously using the correct tool. And yes, you may have to snip off the tip of it if the lug is too long. So let's start off with the main supply. That will go through the top opening, and yes, it is live earth and neutral. And the connector block inside the housing, we do not ship it seated onto. It's supposed to make your connection to it simpler. And obviously live is the brown to the match them up on the connector block with earth in the middle and neutral on the neutral is the blue connection. Again, we do suggest use lugs to make a decent connection. The connector block we haven't seated to make it easier for you, and once you are completed and you're happy, you stick that back over the pins provided to secure it properly. And here is something that we suggest you do. We often find that the earth is not connected on the other end. So measure mains 220 volts at the 230 AC between live, obviously between live and neutral, but also between live and earth. And yes, there are some nifty little gadgets out there. Voltage pens that you can just stick on it and you can see the voltage. Next we say switch on so that we can see the power is correct, the power supply is correct, the PC board's alive, and you will see the board ticking. So hurrah, it's Christmas, the power is correct and the board is running. Seat the connector block back on its post so that it's all neat and out of the way. Obviously to do this you need to switch off the mains again at the source. You could now replace the cover over the high voltage section of the housing, but we'd suggest actually you do this when you are after installing the battery. Now for the rest of the connections. There are 7 identical 10-pin terminals, connectors, and get your connection sheet, and I'd suggest just tape it up that you can see what goes where. Details of this is given in the presentation. There are inputs, two connectors for inputs, 2 for readers, and at the end is the power supply. Just before that are the connections to the relays, and then on the side is where RS485 and RS232 can be connected. So best practice is to start at the far end. That's where the outputs are, the relays are, and yes, you can use ripcord, but please, this must be 0.5 millimeter squared cable. For your latches, they typically carry 1 amp. So not that thin stuff, you are going to pick up problems. And again, lug them and connect through the relays as required. I'm showing here now, I'm connecting up an input, but I'm picking up power from the end connector, and yes, I've pre-lugged this and cut them off to the right side. So connecting in the power and connecting in the inputs, and yes, it is a small screwdriver required. It's the name of the size of it is 0.0. So yes, best practice is wire in from the right, the outputs, and then the readers, and then the inputs, and yes, you can remove the terminal block to simplify your connecting of these cables. So screw them down, all lugged, and reseat the terminal at its correct place. Note that the only critical connection are the power inputs. It's the only way that you are going to damage this board. Those are the ones on the right, and yes, they are marked with red. The power input are pre-wired and it's red, and the connectors are marked correctly, so that's the only critical one. You wouldn't really probably not break anything if you put a connector in anywhere else. And then finally you would put in the LAN connections and the Ethernet connections. So once all your cables are in, remove the PC board to install the battery, and simpler to get to your earth cables, your screen cables. As described in the presentation, your reader cables need to be screened, and also your RS48 cables, and these should be tied down to earth. The RS485 cables only at one end of the segment. We will explain that later. And yes, don't drop your, Murphy says you are going to drop them, so 2 screws out and simply clip out the board and just hang it out of harm's way. Then we would take all the screens, twist them together and tie them down to the provided earth terminal block. It is much easier when the PC board is out. And yes, long nose tire makes life a little bit simpler. So now to install the battery, connect it up to the two cables provided, and red to red, black to black. And yes, do this with, remove the not as shown, remove the power supply cover, because these cables must be over the clip that holds the battery in place. So, and then push it right down and into the back. It clips in very snugly. Once the battery is in, clip back your PC board, clip it on the right hand side, and put back the two screws that you took the board out with. And yes, go back through the two earth lugs that they were connected to. This protects the board from noise and reduces surges and lightning damage dramatically. Our controller is the last one to go if there are massive surges and lightning. Once the board is back, neaten up your cables, and please note, blue cable. We say use blue. Blue for access control, so that your cables stand out, that they are different, that some other installer or some other product doesn't remove your cables or damage your cables. Again, best practice here is do not tie your cable ties down now. Once everything is done, then the cable tie is tight, clip off, make it neat, and modify the ties. Softcon does have little test boards that can help you with testing your installation with LEDs, switches, and the like, and they are available from Softcon. So you can test it while these little boards will go in when it is installed. And then you can, if required, you can plug in a handheld program, look at settings, and change parameters for local testing while offline. Finally, replace the lid. See that it goes right down, and obviously lock, and there you are, all done. To complete the video of installation, let's look at an old controller. These controllers were in metal boxes. It was also a CR391 metal boxes with bigger PC boards. The connectors sort of similar, slightly larger. Pinout order almost the same on most of them. But yes, you can only replace a PC board. The newer ones are smaller that have a power supply, the 12-volt power supply. If you see a transformer, sorry, you'll have to replace the whole controller. So basically what you do is pull out the connectors and loosen the nuts, the 4 nuts on the corners, and lift out the PC board. Then we take the studs off the housing inside, and we will reuse them on adapter plates. These adapter plates allow for the smaller PC board, and you install it with a C inverted and put those studs back onto those standoffs back onto these plates, and mount these back onto the studs that are provided on the PC board, and there your PC board. And there you are. You've done a new installation. You have replaced the board in an old installation, and enjoy your present.